Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get into this week's show. Friends, lovers, listeners, welcome to your Sunday morning spoon. As we all know, I'm unable to shut the fuck up, and no one needs 3-hour-long episodes, so I am here on this sleepy, sketty September Sunday morning to answer all of your questions that were sent in for Wednesday's episode. So, let's get into them for today. Here is Sunday Spooning Sexual Confidence Edition. Okay, off we go. Question number 1. How to rebuild sexual confidence in a long-term relationship where it almost feels awkward to have sex with someone you've been with for so long, or someone you've lost total sexual attraction to. Well, for a start, it feels pertinent to say you are definitely not alone. So many people out there feel like sex with their partner has become routine, or they are not as attracted to them as they once were. It is literally one of the main reasons I wanted to start studying sex and relationships, because of that old adage that once you're married, you don't have sex anymore. Because why? That doesn't sound right or fun, but it is so unbelievably common. And I appreciate you sending in this question, because I think it will provide information for a lot of people who maybe still feel a bit hesitant to ask. So let's start to really look at this. So I know people often hate when I talk about the science, because science isn't portrayed as the sexiest thing in the world, but I cannot hammer it home enough that it is so natural for a shift to occur in relationships after around the 2-year mark. And a lot of that is down to the science. And why are we not taught this? Because if we were, it would be so much easier for us to literally and physically understand things that are going on in our bodies, because the honeymoon period is a real thing scientifically. And that honeymoon period can, of course, continue on and on, but that's going to be reliant on you actually liking each other. And here is why. For the first 6 months, up to around 2 years, when we are with someone new and we have that new relationship energy, our bodies physically produce hormones, neurotransmitters, literal chemical messengers that dictate how we might feel in these early stages of a relationship. So dopamine is like your brain's feel-good messenger. It's the same reaction we get from addiction, even validation from things like people liking a post on social media, which is one of the reasons social media has become so addictive and problematic. But when it comes to love and sex, every time you experience a romantic spark or an intimate moment, your dopamine levels spike, which makes you feel more euphoric and more deeply connected. So it fuels your desire and helps you build a stronger bond with your partner or your partners. And that in turn increases your sex drive. So you may be having way more sex than you would naturally feel inclined to. And alongside that, also dubbed the love hormone, we have oxytocin, which is released again during intimate encounters. And it's kind of like a natural glue that cements your like emotional tie to another person. So every time you have those moments, oxytocin heightens them and makes them feel even more intense, whether that's cuddling after sex or anything like that. So your body is really assisting you when it comes to sex and to attraction, because these are both hormones that affect your sex drive towards the more regular side of things. However, all of these hormones stabilize over time, and after about 2 years, you are no longer being supported by those physical chemicals in your body. And what you're left with is how you actually feel about that person in terms of love and attraction towards them, and, you know, whether you actually like them or not. And it's one of the huge reasons most people feel a shift after a couple of years and feel that sense of reevaluation, like, where is this relationship actually going? And so many people think that there is something wrong and that there's a problem, but it's actually completely natural, because it's just your mind being left to essentially fend for itself without that physical and chemical support from your body. So that is a very natural time for couples to feel that change in the amount they may have gotten used to having sex, as people settle into what might feel like more of a natural sex drive level for them. And if we do love and want to continue a relationship with that partner, this can be a real navigational period. And if you are in a relationship that's very codependent, even more so, because as humans, we naturally find ourselves drawn to a bit of mystery and almost a sense of distance. And ironically, when we get too close to someone, we can lose that spark of intrigue and independence, which quite often keeps the sexual attraction alive. And I don't know if anyone listening has read or listened to much by Esther Perel, but her research on this is so eye-opening, because she explains that when people become too fused and essentially lose their individual identities, that can actually kill the connection, because there's no longer a separate self to connect with. And I mean, I'm fairly open about the fact that if I end up in a relationship again, I don't think I could live with a partner full time. Like, I definitely need 3 nights a week to myself. And I know that isn't something that will make sense to everyone, and it doesn't have to. But I do think that if people had even 1 night away from each other a week, it would keep a flame going that most people aren't even realizing has dimmed, because missing your partner can actually be a really good thing. But anyway, what does this all mean for our relationships? Because if there's too much distance, we might lose the connection. But if we're too close, we can lose that sense of separateness that almost fuels our passion for each other. So it's actually really fucking complex fun, because we generally want both security and excitement in our relationships, but those two needs can conflict, because we might crave that comfort of predictability, but passion thrives on unpredictability. And similarly, we might seek the familiarity of routine with our partners, but getting stuck in a rut can dull our desire. So fun, isn't it? So good. Love that this is the human experience. But how do we juggle these conflicting needs? Because it is easier said than done, and it's going to be about finding the right balance for you. And I really want to emphasize that everyone's balance is going to look completely different. And you want a balance where you can still enjoy your emotional connection and keep the passion alive. And that's okay to make space for both security and excitement in your relationship, even though it might feel a bit jarring at first. So ask yourself a few key questions to get clear on what you are seeking. What do you really want from your partner? What does attraction mean to you? Because attraction definitely isn't just about physical appearance, despite what society loves to tell us. So we all know looks change over time. And what really matters is what's below the surface. So reflect on what attracts you to your partner. Is it their humor? Is it their kindness? Is it the way they support you? There's so much to think about, and to look at your partner as a whole human and step back a bit and do that, which is so hard when we've been with someone for so many years and we know them so well. And it might feel a little strange to analyze them in that way. But that mild reset of looking at them as a human and being like, these are the things that actually do keep me attracted to you. They are important. And then, as you've probably guessed, first things first, you're going to have to talk about it. And I know that is not the easiest conversation to have. And I really respect how difficult it is for people to speak to their partners about sex at all, because we just don't know how to. And even more so when you have something going on that you are actively worried about hurting your partner's feelings over, or facing truths that might feel uncomfortable or awkward. Listen, no one is ever going to feel good about saying they have lost their sexual attraction. But this communication is absolutely crucial, because it isn't about pointing fingers or placing blame. It's about sitting down together and saying, I've noticed something feels off for me, and I think it's important that we look at this and address it together. And once you frame it as that team effort, which it is, you can tackle the issue without making it feel like anyone's at fault. And it also opens the door for your partner to share their feelings, which you never know. They might be surprisingly similar to yours, especially if there has been that mutual distance in the sexual respect. And also if there are any lingering issues in other areas of your relationship that might be seeping into the sexual side of things, it gives you the opportunity to address them kindly rather than sitting on them and letting them fester in any way, because it is definitely very hard to feel attracted to someone if you are holding on to any kind of resentment. So that conversation and the ongoing conversations that come from it are going to be imperative. And fairly often, I don't know what are the specifics in your case, but fairly often when the physical attraction starts to fade, it's because the emotional connection has weakened over time. And that can definitely feel the case more so for women and vulva owners. I don't like to generalize, of course, but in a broader sense, women do hold on to the emotional side of sex a little more commonly than men and penis owners do. And that's only in a broad sense. Obviously, there are many, many exceptions, but if the emotional connection has weakened over time, that can quite drastically affect how women and vulva owners do feel towards sex. And it is totally normal in long-term relationships for this to happen, but it is something that can be worked on, and rebuilding that bond can do wonders for your physical connection. So you almost have to start again and start by reconnecting outside the bedroom or whatever room you choose. You know, you need to go on date nights, try something completely new together, like a hobby that you both enjoy, or even starting new hobbies independently from each other to have your own little things to indulge in and feel your independence again, but then making the time after to talk about them and get excited for each other. Or simply making time to have the kind of deep, meaningful conversations that we often have at the beginning of our relationships, but maybe don't so often anymore. And one important thing, I think, is to not talk about sex during those times. Just focus on each other and your life together, your shared experiences, and small acts of affection, that physical intimacy, like holding hands, cuddling on the sofa, or like kissing just because. Those things can help bring back the closeness without the pressure of where it might lead. And it's very easy for us to get into a spiral of negativity and start focusing on things we maybe don't find attractive in a partner. But instead of thinking about that, look at everything you do appreciate. Also, small things like more eye contact and more physical touch in a non-sexual sense, they can also enhance feelings of attraction for each other again. But in terms of pressure, I know this might sound counterintuitive, especially when you're trying to rebuild sexual confidence, but it can really be a game changer. Take sex off the table for a bit. By removing the expectation of sex, you allow yourselves to reconnect in a way that's literally just about enjoying each other's company and enjoying each other's touch. And that can be incredibly freeing, and it can help ease anxiety or awkwardness that might have built up over this time until you've got to where you feel today. Just focus on being close and spending quality time together without distractions. Put down the screens and connect with each other. Give each other a massage. And I don't mean a sexually leading massage, just a simple back rub. Have a bath together. Just do things that don't have an agenda. And this kind of physical intimacy just starts to rebuild a foundation for when you are ready to reintroduce sex into the equation. And don't forget the power of flirting. Even with your long-term partner, I think, honestly, we should never stop flirting. But sometimes we get so comfortable in our relationships that we just forget how much fun it can be to flirt. But bringing back that kind of playful energy can really do wonders for reigniting things a little bit. So, send your partner a little flirty text during the day, give them a compliment when they're not expecting it. Just small things like that are what help to add a bit of mystery back into what might have become a routine. And on that note, also try introducing a bit of novelty into your relationship, because new experiences, just being what they are as their own entity, can help revive a sense of excitement. And that doesn't have to mean something drastic. It can be something as simple as picking a new recipe to cook together, or taking a spontaneous little day trip, or trying somewhere completely new for a date night. And in the bedroom, when the time is right, that might mean experimenting with a new position or trying out some role play. Maybe that might help to sort of get out of your head a little bit and pretend you're someone else for a minute. Or even just talking about any fantasies that you might have in a way that feels more comfortable for the both of you. And the key, obviously, is to do all of this at your own pace. You know, nothing should feel forced in any way. And as I talked a lot about on Wednesday, self-confidence plays a huge role in how you feel about sex, and taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, that all really boosts your sexual confidence. When you feel good about yourself, it reflects in your relationship and in your sex drive. So invest in yourself. And that can be anything from exercise to a new hobby to self-care routines that make you feel empowered, anything that makes you feel sexy. I know that I feel so much better and so much more sexually confident when I just keep up daily habits and hobbies that are for me. And I just think knowing that we are still investing in ourselves is so huge, because whilst I hope every relationship works out the way you all want yours to, if they go awry, you need to have yourself to come back to. So please always remember to fill your own cup and back yourself. No matter what happens around you, you will always have you. You are your home. So take care of that. And the more you do, the more confident you will feel, I promise you. And with that being said, don't forget to explore your own desires, because it's really easy to lose touch with what turns us on after years in a relationship. And rediscovering yourself sexually can feel very empowering. So whether that's through masturbation and self-exploration, maybe reading some erotica, maybe it's audio porn, maybe it's just daydreaming about fantasies or what makes you feel sexy, but get back in touch with your own desires. And as a result, that might help bring you more confidence and bring more excitement back into your sexual relationship with your partner. Now, if it still feels tough to get past that awkwardness, or if the issues run deeper than you feel you can manage on your own, you know I'm going to say there's absolutely no shame in seeking help. If it is accessible to you, a couples therapist or a sex therapist can absolutely help provide some guidance that you might need to work through any challenges. And they are going to offer you guidance that is tailored to your specific situation, because I worry that my advice on here might be a little broad and vague because I don't know the ins and outs of every individual's setup. But, you know, they will help you navigate the process in a healthy and constructive way. I've had sex therapy multiple times in my life. It fueled me wanting to do it myself. And I know there is still so much stigma attached to it, but fuck that. Sex is a huge natural part of our daily, weekly, monthly lives in one way or another. And if we are getting therapy for literally anything else, why would this be any different? And rebuilding this kind of sexual confidence and reconnection with your partner is not going to be something that happens overnight. It is a process. And it's really important to be kind to yourself and to yourselves along the way. So when you have a great conversation, when you enjoy a moment of closeness or just feel a little flicker again, celebrate those small wins. You know, keep celebrating along the way if you feel things start to shift back. But, and this is the tough part of the conversation, but I have to say it because even as a sex therapist, they can't fix things. Sex therapy is only there to guide people to what is the best outcome for them. So what if after all that effort, it still doesn't work? Because this can happen, and relationships like people, change over time. And sometimes, despite all of our best efforts, the sexual connection just isn't what it used to be. And maybe it doesn't come back at all. And it doesn't mean that you or your partner have failed. Do not think that even for a second. It just means that you might need to approach the situation from a different angle. And if you have tried everything and the spark still isn't there, it might be time to take a step back and evaluate the relationship as a whole. Are you still happy together in other aspects? Is it a relationship that fulfills you both emotionally, intellectually, in terms of companionship? Because for some couples, sexual compatibility is a non-negotiable of their relationship. And if it's gone, then they cannot find a way to stay connected. And for others, sex plays a less central role and they can find satisfaction in other forms of intimacy. So it's really important to have an honest conversation with your partner about where you both stand on that and what you are both going to need moving forward. If sex is still a challenge, you might want to redefine what intimacy means for you as a couple, because intimacy doesn't have to revolve around sex. It has to be about emotional closeness, and that can be shared experiences, the conversations that you have with each other, or physical affection that doesn't lead to sexual intercourse or anything in the sexual space. So for some couples, that shift can bring a new sense of satisfaction. In some cases, couples who find themselves at an impasse sexually might explore alternative relationship models. And if you've listened to the podcast for a while, you will already know my feelings on this, and that I am extremely pro people finding whatever relationship structure works for them. Monogamy doesn't always work for everyone forever. It doesn't actually fully work for many people, sorry to say, but basically your relationship doesn't have to look the way you thought it was going to, the way we all thought they were going to when we grew up with Disney movies. And that might involve opening up the relationship, whether that means consensually non-monogamous arrangements or just allowing each other the freedom to explore sexual connections outside the relationship. That, of course, is not going to be a solution for everyone, because it has to be something everyone is actually on board with. And that requires a lot of trust, communication, and very clear boundaries to work. And there's a lot more on that in my episode, Is Monogamy Not For Me?, to delve into that deeper. But for some, it can be a way to maintain the emotional bond of your relationship and acknowledging that sexual needs might be met elsewhere. Listen, I'm never going to be into anal sex. So no matter what relationship structure I end up in, they are always going to get that need met elsewhere if it's something that they desire. So that is something that you can look at discussing, but only you know if that's something you might feel comfortable with or not. But I just want you to know you have options. We don't have to default to what we think we are supposed to do. And sometimes the painful truth is that relationships evolve, and that might mean coming to terms with the fact that the sexual connection you did once have has changed or faded. And that can be a really hard realization, and it's absolutely okay to take time to grieve the loss of that connection. But it's also important to focus on how you can move forward, whether that means finding new ways to connect with your partner, or in some cases, deciding it's time to move on. But if you find yourselves at this crossroads, again, I do think it can be helpful to seek professional guidance to help you work through those feelings and decide on the best path forward, whether that is continuing to work on the relationship in a very new way or coming to an amicable decision about what's best for the both of you. Listen, every relationship has a journey, and sometimes it can take some really unexpected turns, and it is okay. So whether you end up reigniting the spark, redefining your version of intimacy, or even parting ways, the really important thing when it comes to something as sensitive as this is to approach the situation with kindness, with honesty, and with mutual respect for each other. Relationships are hard and they are about growth, both individually and together. And whatever the outcome, you will have learned more about yourself and your needs along the way. And that is, in its own way, a really positive thing. But I know this is hard. I really hope something in there was helpful. I feel like I've talked for so long, but I just feel like it's such a big conversation and it's so nuanced, and everyone's situation will be so different, but there will be so many people listening going through this exact same thing. So I wanted to cover as many bases as I could in the hope that something in there helps. But I'm sending you so much love, and if there is anything else I can do to help, please just do let me know. Next question. I've got a crush. What do I do? Tell them. Slide on into their DMs. I mean, that's my first instinct because that's very on brand for me. But is it just a fleeting attraction, or is it something that seems a bit deeper? I guess that's something you might want to figure out before you decide what to do next. Although I suppose sometimes that's something we don't really know until we potentially go down the path. But, oh, crushes. I sometimes can turn into someone I barely recognise when I have a full crush. So you're not alone. I absolutely kind of love getting caught up in that little whirlwind of infatuation, even though it definitely can lead to some less than stellar moments. I feel like it's so overwhelming, and it feels like a full throwback to being a teenager. It's definitely one of the things that makes me still feel so youthful. The fact that crushes can strike at any age. And if you feel like your crush turns you into a crazy person, don't you worry. It's a common experience. And funnily enough, they're actually just a really natural part of how we seek connection with others. But I do feel like the emotional roller coaster that comes with the infatuation of a crush, it actually stirs up a lot of anxiety, doesn't it? Gosh. I had a great story. Maybe I'm going to save that for the last episode of the season. But I had a childhood crush, a TV crush. And I used to kiss their poster every night before I went to bed. Anyway, I got to live out my childhood TV crush fantasies later on in life. So that was fun. But who knew? That was a 25-year crush. It's a long time, that. Anyway, sorry, I have digressed. Let's talk about your crush. Well, do you think they're into you as well? Are there any signs? How do they react around you? Do you even know them? Have you just found them on Instagram? You're just hitting up people's Instagram photos. If you do know them, do you think there's a mutual interest? Because if so, then cool. Focus on getting to know them better. Spend some time together. Just chat to them. Just be yourself. So risky when being yourself is being me, because most people are like, this bitch is batshit crazy. And you know what? They're right. Anyway, that's important. Authenticity is key when you've got a crush. Don't let that wild shit going on in your head turn you into a version of yourself that you don't even recognize. I have done that before. I don't know if anyone followed that trend that was going around on TikTok for ages, that one. And it was people playing that, I remember when I lost my mind. And then it was a video of them doing something they had done to impress a crush. And you know, when you look back at those times and you're like, what the actual fuck was I playing at? Who is that person? is that? What fresh hell was I going through? To also think that denying who I was a good idea, but also doing that to try and impress someone. Oh my God, it's shocking. I need to try and think up some of the shit that I've done for the last episode. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely mortifying. Maybe that's why I can't think of anything. I've probably shut it far, far away. But that is what I would say is so important when you have a crush, is to not let the wild shit take over. Don't try and impress your crush with a facade, which is actually just your hormones going wild. And also, I know I said this at the beginning of this answer, but genuinely, if it feels right, tell them how you feel. It doesn't have to be a big dramatic statement. Just tell them you enjoy spending time with them, or that you find them cool, that you like their energy. What is it that people say these days? There's probably a Gen Z version of that. It's giving, I'm into you. That is shite. No, don't say that. But just be honest and tell them how you feel and see how they respond, because what have you got to lose? Obviously, yes, when we tell someone we like them, you have to be prepared for any outcome. And I know that people know I'm confident, but I promise you that shit has blown up in my face pretty badly a couple of times. So you kind of have to be prepared. It could go either way. So it might be positive, it might not be what you hoped for, but that's all part of the dating game, right? So just, I'm always like, shoot your shot. If it's appropriate, if your crush is like married with children, maybe this isn't the best advice, because I'm presuming this is a crush that is potentially available. But yeah, I think every crush is a step in like understanding yourself more and what you're looking for. So I just think go for it if you can. I'm going back to what I said at the beginning of the answer. If it's respectful and they are available, tell them, slide into those DMs. Is it me? Are you an MT boy between the height of 5'10", 5'11"? Because don't hesitate. Like, literally hit me up right now. I'm joking. I love you. I'm obsessed with all of you. Anyway, next question. We've got to move on. I'm losing my mind. I lost my confidence a few years ago after meeting up with a recent ex at the time, where she told me I was doing weird things in bed. Oh, sorry, I wasn't expecting that. When I later asked her what she meant, she closed up and wouldn't elaborate on what she meant, saying, "We don't always get the closure we want." There's a lot to unpack in that question and what you've sent. First of all, I fucking hate the word weird. What's weird? What's weird things in bed? What's normal things in bed? Is it kinks? Is it design? What is that? I don't like that. I don't like that language for a start. Anyway, okay. It's really important that you know that this feedback from one person is not a definitive judgment on your skills or your worth in the sexual space, in your sexual encounters. We know I have a huge thing about language. It's one of the reasons I do not condone people saying that someone is good or bad in bed. Have I ever done that in my life? Yes, of course. But I have learnt otherwise. I don't think it's a respectful way to talk about people in the sexual space, because it's binary. And once you put a label on someone, it means they are or they aren't. And I don't agree with that, because I think sex is so fluid that it really is just what one person is saying. I know that really trivializes it, but because one person has said that you are doing weird things in bed, it doesn't mean that you do weird things in bed. I'm sure like there's people who've had sex with me that are probably say I've done weird things in bed. So honestly, don't take it to heart for a start. But the fact that she didn't elaborate on what she meant, I find that really stressful actually. But I think it suggests that her comments might have been more about her own feelings or misunderstandings rather than a fair critique of your performance. It's giving notes. And so often people have difficulty articulating their feelings or providing constructive criticism, which is not really what I think we should be doing to people in bed. But that kind of, it's quite disrespectful, but that kind of behavior really just leaves us with more questions than answers. So reflecting on the situation, think about the context and the source of that feedback, because your ex is someone who knows you personally, and those comments could have been influenced by her own biases. How did your relationship end? All of that stuff might be playing into this. And it's worth considering that her perspective might be coloured by unresolved feelings or a desire to justify the end of your relationship rather than offering objective feedback. I mean, maybe towards the end, your sexual tastes were changing. Maybe the way that you both approach sex was starting to feel differently for both of you. So what felt natural to you might have felt weird to her, and vice versa. That's also okay. Like, it's perfectly fine for us to be in relationships and along the way our sexual taste change. We discover we're into different things. Maybe that aligns with our partner, maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that might feel weird to them. And it shouldn't be used as an insult, because that doesn't mean that you are doing weird things in bed. It means that your sexual tastes might be very different to theirs. And so maybe your sexual compatibility isn't quite sitting right. But I think to rebuild your confidence, focus on the positive experiences. Like, remind yourself of the times when you did feel good about the connection with your partner, because those moments are really valid. And do you have any other partners that you feel like you could have an open conversation with to seek some feedback from them, who might communicate a bit more constructively? Because honest and clear feedback can actually provide us all with actionable insights, and that helps us to improve in ways, doesn't, not just in sex, but just in life. Helpful feedback, that helps us improve, and it doesn't undermine our confidence. And if you feel like you need a bit more of a boost, another approach is, listen, we can always learn more. I feel like I know a lot about sex and intimacy and relationships, but I'll never know it all. We can always learn more. And the more that I learn, the more that I educate myself, the more confident I feel to approach literally any sexual situation. So for you to feel more confident, you can always educate yourself more, whether that's books, whether that's podcasts, whether that's TV programs, whether that's workshops. All of these things constantly help us gain better understandings of our own needs, our own preferences, and how to navigate other people's needs and preferences. And when we feel educated and we feel informed, that really boosts our confidence just through knowledge and awareness of how we might all be navigating sex. And so if you find yourself in another sexual situation with someone and they feel like something is weird, it will just be a lot easier to have a conversation about it, and to also articulate why that feels natural for you, and to understand why it maybe feels unnatural to them. So I would always tell people to do more research. I mean, it's literally all I do. So there's no shame in like picking up more books and just learning more and more about sex, because it's also always fluid and always changing. But ultimately, we all have moments of doubt. I promise you are one of literally every other human on the planet. And your self-worth, your sexual worth is not defined by a single experience or a single piece of feedback. So building confidence for you is going to be an ongoing process of accepting that situation for what it was and letting it go. and just growing from it. And be kind to yourself, because I think that's really challenging to have not been given clarity, but where there's only so much we can do with what we have, and I will say this, you didn't get the closure that you wanted. And I don't think that's necessarily fair. I think it would have been much kinder to have given more clarification and to have elaborated, but it seems like that's not going to happen, and that's a shame. So it's going to be about accepting that situation for what it was and letting it move past, and knowing that all we can do is move forward into the next situation and try and do it with more information and education behind us. I believe if we know how to communicate, if we know how to listen to a partner, if we know how to respond to them, both verbal and non-verbal cues, if we are attentive, if we care about their pleasure, if all of those things are in place, sex is the product of all of those things. So focus on all of those sides of sex. And if you feel confident in those areas, then anything physical should follow confidence-wise. But it will continue to grow as you focus on all of those aspects of your sexual experience. But I'm sorry that happened. I think that's a real shame, and I would actively discourage anyone who's listening from talking to an ex-partner like that. And can we all please steer away from using words like weird? Just say something isn't for me. That's not to my taste. Something like that brings it back to ourselves rather than pointing fingers at the other person, because I hate that. But I really hope you can let that situation go, because I think you will start to feel so much better when you do. Just branching out into the world of field, hoping for a safe friends with benefits situation. I met a nice guy, but not totally into him personality-wise. While the sex is nice, I could happily take or leave. How do I gently say, you're nice, but I'm not 100% into you, but thanks, lol. By the way, I'm 43, female, straight. Okay, I'm trying to think what I would say to someone if I was in this situation. I would probably say something like, I have genuinely really enjoyed the time we've spent together. I think you are a great person. Do you think they're a great person? Something to that effect. Because you want to say it nicely, right? I think you're a great person, and that's why I think it's important to be honest with you about where I am coming from. I've been doing some reflecting on our connection with each other, and whilst I value the time we've had, I've come to realize that I'm not feeling the way that I was maybe hoping for. I would probably say something like, it's clear that we have a good rapport. I really enjoy our interactions, but I'm not quite sure that we are the match I'm looking for in terms of a deeper connection. One thing I would probably always say to someone is, I really want to be upfront with you because I think you deserve honesty and I respect you. And that is true. I always respect my sexual partners, whatever direction our relationship goes in. So I always want people to know that I respect them. This isn't about anything you've done or who you are. It's just about how I'm feeling and what I am seeking in a relationship at this point in my life. I hope you understand this is a reflection of my personal feelings and not a critique of our time together or you. I'd probably say I appreciate their understanding and our experiences, and I would want that person to know that the decision comes from a place of respect and care. And then I genuinely hope you find someone who aligns perfectly with what you are looking for and who can give you the connection you deserve. And then just thank you for being a good person, for being open to this conversation. I wish you all the best. I wish you happiness, fulfillment, anything you want to end it with. I feel like maybe something like that works as a framework. That's the kind of thing I think I would appreciate if I was on the receiving end. So anything within that framework, you are more than welcome to take it and tweak it as you like. You know your relationship with this person, or the dates or the time that you spent together. So you might want to add, take away, whatever. But feel free to take and use that as a framework if it helps. You might be like, that's shit, I'm going to go and put it through ChatGPT. But that's maybe what I would suggest. Next question. I don't know if I'm doing it right. Feel like I used to be so much better in bed. I mean, I think it's completely normal that we have phases where we just feel less confident about how we're doing in bed. And I think that can sometimes depend on what our sexual relationships have been, because if you've been with someone and you are like super sexually compatible, so every time you are having sex with that person, you are just super aligned and everything works and you know each other so well anatomically, and then that ends for one reason or another, and then you meet someone else and maybe things are a bit awkward or not quite as aligned at the beginning, that can definitely knock our confidence, and it can make you feel like, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, maybe I just knew what I was doing with that person. So if you can remember a time when you felt absolutely on top of your game, what was happening then? And always just remember, we all go through this. So feeling less confident towards sex, it's so common. We're all in this with you. But just reflect on what might have changed since you felt more confident. Because I can normally tie it to, I was just really compatible with XYZ person. So everything was just a bit easier because there wasn't as much work to put in, because putting work in can sometimes feel awkward and you're like, oh my God, like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. But everyone's body is so different. So that's not the judgment call of whether you do or don't know what you're doing in bed, or whether you're doing it right or wrong, which is language I don't use, as we know, because it's far too binary. But are there any new factors affecting you? As in, like, have there been any changes in your relationship or your personal life? Because sometimes things like that can help us understand there's just been a shift, and then we can address it a bit more effectively. But do you have a partner? Because if you do, sometimes if we have insecurities in this area, they can be alleviated by having a conversation with them. You know, ask for feedback in a constructive way. If you have a long-term partner, or if you have multiple sexual partners, but you can just ask them something like, I've been feeling a bit unsure about my performance. I don't like the word performance. I've been feeling a bit unsure about how things are going in bed during sex recently. Is there anything specific you enjoy, or anything I could do differently, or anything you would like to say to me? Because that kind of dialogue really opens up the conversation for just freedom of speech in the sexual space, which we so often feel like we don't have. And you might get some really valuable insights out of it. You might not, because people might be like, nope. And if they're telling the truth, then great. If they're not, unhelpful. But you know, if that's possible to have active conversations with people who you are engaging sexually with, then that would be great. But also shift your focus from this wanting to be right, good, 10 out of 10, all of those things we say. Just stop trying to be perfect. It doesn't exist. We're never going to be perfect in bed. That's not a goal any of us should be aiming for. Just ensure that you and your partner or your partners are enjoying the experience. Emphasize the pleasure. Emphasize the connection. All of that stuff is way more important than performing to be perfect. And if we put too much pressure on ourselves, that completely hinders our ability to enjoy the moment. As I always say, forget the pressure, find the pleasure. So just take a moment to think about that stuff. It doesn't always have to be about an end goal. Just try and enjoy, stay in the moment, stay present. That really helps. And also use it as an opportunity to explore and learn a bit, because if you're feeling a bit unsure of where you're at sexually, try some new things, whether that's some new positions or some new techniques, because maybe you just feel a bit stagnant. Maybe it's not that you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Maybe you just feel a little bit stuck. And if you find some new ways to connect sexually, that might invigorate your confidence a bit and remind you of the variety that sex and intimacy can actually offer. But I always say when people feel unconfident sexually, you also have to start rebuilding that confidence outside of the bedroom. So just engage in things that make you feel good about yourself. I always find that exercise does that, or engaging in hobbies that I love and that make me feel good, or just like spending time with friends that I think are fucking awesome. All of that stuff makes me feel really good about myself. And once you feel confident in those other areas, that then translates into better self-esteem in those intimate situations. So start, as I've said earlier in this episode, to fill your own cup, and that will then spill over into those other moments in your life. Obviously, if you feel like it's really affecting your ability to connect sexually, I would always suggest talking to someone if you wanted. That might not be where you're at, but I like to always put it out there as a suggestion. But just be patient and compassionate with yourself, because it's so natural for our confidence to fluctuate in any aspect of our life. And it's so okay to have those ups and downs. So I would say take this as an opportunity to rediscover what works for you. And I think you might find that that confidence will then grow again with time and, of course, some more experience. But I think you're going to be just fine. Okay, these next two questions are fairly similar, but I will do them separately, but you'll see what I mean. How would you approach the option of a threesome in a relationship? Well, it's definitely something that needs to be handled with care and sensitivity. I would say that. And it's definitely important to understand why you are interested in having a threesome, in that experience, and how you really feel about it. Are you drawn to the idea for the right reasons? I don't know what the right reasons would be, but you know what I mean. Or is there something else motivating you? You know, is it something that you want to engage in with your partner because you really want each other to have that experience together? Or are you feeling a bit bored and just thinking that involving someone else might help because it's not a band-aid, it's not going to fix anything? And that might not be your thought pathway at all, but I just have to put all the options out there, because once you've sorted out those thoughts, then you can bring it up with your partner and, you know, make sure you can put that time aside to talk openly with each other. Be honest, but also be sensitive to your partner's feelings, unless you've ever spoken about it before. But just let them know you've been thinking about it and you want to share it with them. You're curious about exploring a threesome, but you'd love to know how they feel about it. And, you know, listen to their response, and you'll have to be prepared for a range of emotions and outcomes, because they might be interested, but they might be unsure. They might be completely against the idea. And it's important to respect their perspective on it. And you can discuss the expectations or the boundaries that each of you might have if you were to explore it. Because if you do go ahead, setting clear guidelines is crucial so that you both know what's acceptable and what isn't. And if you lay that all out beforehand, you absolutely have to stick to it, unless you have the conversation that it's going to be fluid as you move through it. But don't set some boundaries with your partner before you do it and then get into the threesome and disrespect them, because that's just disrespecting your relationship. But you will know what's acceptable and what isn't. And, you know, think about how introducing a third person might affect your relationship, and ensure that your motivations for having this threesome align with enhancing your connection with your partner rather than complicating it, which is what I was saying at the beginning of the answer. And if you do decide to proceed, make sure everyone involved is not just fully on board, but also enthusiastic about the experience. Consent is always number one. So everyone has to feel comfortable with the agreed boundaries and rules. Keep the communication open throughout the process. Check in with each other, address any feelings, address any concerns that come up, because they might. If it's your first time, of course, things might get uncomfortable, things might need to be discussed. Afterwards, make sure you have a follow-up discussion, talk about how it went, address any issues that might have come up. And if navigating this new territory brings up unexpected emotions or challenges, which it absolutely might, just be prepared for that and be ready to support each other. The goal of a threesome, if you have one, is for it to be a positive experience for everyone involved and for it to be fun. And the best way that's going to happen is if everyone feels respected and valued. So they are my tips to making sure that can happen. And whilst we're on the threesome chat, another question was, myself and my partner both watch threesome porn, but never discuss having a threesome ourselves. Should we have a threesome? And that's really interesting. And I wonder if that's something a lot of couples find themselves thinking about at some point. Because watching threesome porn together is one thing, and deciding to actually have one is a completely different conversation. Because I know people watch a lot of porn and also have a lot of fantasies that they don't ever have any plan on acting on. So it is also completely okay for those things to be separate. It is absolutely fine to have a category of porn that you enjoy watching and engaging with, but don't ever plan to engage in personally. Same as fantasies that you might have in your head, but you know that realistically it's not something that you actively want to live out in real life. A lot of heterosexual women and vulva owners mostly watch lesbian porn because it's more geared towards female pleasure, but they have no active desire to have sex with another woman and vulva owner. So just because we enjoy watching something or fantasizing about something doesn't mean that we actively want to live it out. So just do keep that in mind. But I mean, next time you are watching threesome porn, why don't you have a conversation with your partner? Because you could just ask them how they feel about the idea of having one and why you might be interested in it, because you might find that you're both on the same page and you might both be considering one. And is that because you both genuinely want to explore what you've been watching together out in real time? And again, as I've just said in the last answer, if you decide that you want to explore one and you want to pursue it, set out your boundaries, discuss what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, what you're not even willing to try, how you'll handle any potential emotional or relational challenges that might arise. Because introducing a third person into a relationship in any way can, of course, have implications for your relationship dynamic. Every relationship is different, but of course it can have implications. So always consider how a threesome might affect your relationship, both emotionally and physically. And just always be prepared for the possibility of the feelings and complications that might arise, and discuss how you will address them if that happens. And then if you do decide to have one, if it's mutual, if you're all enthusiastic, as long as no one feels pressured or uncomfortable, then cute. Go ahead. Give informed, enthusiastic consent, respect each other's boundaries, communicate openly, all of the same stuff that was in the last answer. But I do think that if you are actively watching threesome porn together a lot and you are thinking about this, then yeah, take the time to have the conversation, and then you know that you can make decisions together that are right for your relationship. Last question for today. My girlfriend is always telling me that she's bi, and I want to involve this in our sex life without forcing it. Okay, so on the one hand, I really appreciate that you are thinking about how to include your girlfriend's bisexuality in a way that is respectful and consensual. But your girlfriend is not bisexual for you or for your sex life. So how she wants to navigate that side of her identity, that side of her sexuality, might have absolutely nothing to do with your sex life, and that will have to be okay. Obviously, no prizes for guessing what I'm going to suggest, because the only way you are going to find out any of this is by creating a very safe space to have a conversation. And maybe you just open that discussion with something like, you've mentioned that you are bisexual, and I value how open you have been about your sexuality with me. I'm thinking about how we might explore this aspect of your identity together. How would you feel about incorporating this into our sex life? Because I don't know what your relationship setup is. If you are typically a monogamous couple, maybe this is a nicer way for her to explore it, because you can all be in it together. Maybe if you do have an open situation, she may want to actually explore her sexuality with women, with vulva owners separately. So I don't know what your exact relationship structure is, but I can understand that if you do lean more towards the monogamous side of things, if there is a world in which she may want to involve this side of her sexuality in your sex life and in your relationship, then you can respect the structure of your relationship whilst not expecting her to sacrifice any of her sexuality. So I can understand where this is coming from, but also to say, I want to involve this in our sex life. You have to also be prepared that that might not be something that's even slightly on the table. And the only way you are going to find that out is by opening that space for a conversation. And you need to approach that conversation with curiosity and also with empathy. And listening is going to be just as, if not more important, because she might have specific fantasies or ideas about how she might like to explore her bisexuality with you, but she might feel completely unsure. She might not feel ready to act on it at all. And it's really important that there is an environment in which she can share all of these thoughts comfortably without feeling pressured. And if she is open to the idea of exploring this facet of her sexuality with you, you can then discuss together how you might do this in a way that feels right for both of you. Because for some couples, that might just mean incorporating elements of her bisexuality into your sex life through role play, where you could create scenarios that include her interests. For others, it might involve fantasies and exploring them together. And of course, you might consider involving a third person in your sexual experiences. And as I've already said in the past two answers, that's just going to be very dependent on establishing boundaries and agreements beforehand. Make sure everything is consensual and that everyone involved is on the same page. It's also really important to note that exploring bisexuality doesn't have to mean involving another person. There are many ways to embrace this aspect of her sexuality that don't involve a third person, such as exploring some fantasies, enhancing communication about her desires, or just introducing some new experiences that resonate with her interests. But you just need to maintain some very open lines of communication. You need to check in regularly with each other about how you're feeling, or if there's anything you'd like to adjust. And remember, the goal is to respect her sexual identity and also to strengthen your connection. You are in a relationship. You want each other to feel fulfilled and valued. So be patient, be flexible, because sexual exploration is a journey and it evolves over time. So make sure you approach the conversation with sensitivity and with care. And if you honor her sexuality and her desires, hopefully whatever way you navigate this path together, it will help you find a deeper understanding of each other and therefore create a deeper connection. But there's only one thing I'm going to ask you to do today, and that is start the conversation. Friends, lovers, listeners, happy Sunday spooning, and I hope some of those answers helped to those who sent in the questions today. And I hope that Wednesday's episode and today have helped to cover how to build a more confident mindset, embrace your desires, and feel more secure in your sexuality. Please, please remember, confidence comes from understanding and accepting yourself, not from fitting any certain mold or any version of you that society wants to bracket you into. As long as things are consensual and respectful, all those sexual desires you have are valid and deserve to be explored and not shut away. So I implore you over the rest of Sketty September to start taking a moment for your sexual confidence, whether that's taking some time to appreciate your body more, or initiating during a sexual encounter, or having a conversation with a partner about your sex life, or exploring a fantasy you've maybe been hesitant about. There are so many ways that you can get started, or you can just give a huge fuck you middle finger to society and be well on your way. That works too. I will be back on Wednesday for the penultimate episode of Sex on the Peach, with a bit of a more vulnerable episode about an event in my life that probably affected my sex life more than any other has, because I appreciate how much you are all willing to share with me in your questions. And so it's important to me to also share things with you that I hope might help someone out there who might have gone through something similar. So I will see you for that episode very soon. But for now, thanks for coming. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love.